Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Usman Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna and welcome to all the devotees online. Hope you can hear me loud and clear. Thank you very much for your kind association as we associate with Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1, Chapter 18, verses 41 to 50, concluding this specific chapter. Just a sound check, audio check. Am I audible? Is the sound coming through? Since we do have an internet issue. So let me know in the chat. Okay, good. Thank you. Let us start. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasme Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Taparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagra Jatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitam Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sarva Shastra Biyusha Sarva Vaireka Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokai Triprada Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavato Prabhu Kalibando Didaritya Shri Krishna Parivartita Ocean Bhagavatam, O nectar gem from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, O most prominent transfer food of all the Vedas, O you enrich with the jewels of all spiritual philosophic conclusions, O you grant spiritual vision to all the people of the world, O light breath of the Vaishnava devotees, O Lord, you are the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. You are actually Lord Krishna who has returned amongst us. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshasha Rayate Sarvada Sarva Sevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, offer respectful obeisance to you. By reading you one attains transcendental bliss. For your syllabus rain pure love of God upon the reader. You are always to be served by everyone, for you are incarnation of Lord Krishna. Madhika Bandhu Mad Sange Mad Guru Mad Mahadana Man Nisharaka Mad Bhagya Madananda Namastute. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, O my companion, O my teacher, O my great wealth, O my deliverer, O my good fortune, O my bliss, I offer respectful obeisance unto you. Asadu sadhu tadahi natti nichocha taraka hanamun chakada chinmam premna ritkatiyospura. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O give us saintliness to unsaintly, uplift to the very fallen. Please do not ever leave me. Please become manifest in my heart, my throat, accompanied pure love of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya Yatonvayaditaratas Charte Swabhigna Swara Tene Brahma Hedayadi Kavaye Muyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yat Pratisargom Rasha Damna Swena Sada Nirasta Kuakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisance unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primal cause of all causes of creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge under the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. As one is bewildered by illusory representation of water seen in fire, land seen on water. Only because of him the material universe is temporarily manifested. By the direction of the three modes of nature appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from illusory representation of the material world, and I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Prayanopayesha Sabya Kalabasmin Yuge Janamanda Sumanda Matayomanda Bhagya Padrita. O learned one, it's an iron age of Kali, men but short lives, they're quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above always disturbed. Narayan Namaskritya Narachevam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatoje Mudiraj. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisance to the personality of God and Narayan, unto Narayan Narayan, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasa, the author. Savai Pumso Parodharmo Yato Bhaktira Dokshaja Haituke Prukti Apratyata Yatma Suprasidati. The supreme occupation dharma of all humanity, that by which man can attain to loving devotional service, unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted, complete satisfies. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayatyu Savairagyam Dhyanam Cha Yudahitakam. By rendering devotional service under the person of God, Krishna, one immediately acquires positive knowledge and detachment from the world. Vedanti Tattva Vedas Tattvam Yajnanam Advayam Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Sabhyate. Learned transcendentals who know the absolute truth call is non-dual substance, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. Shrushrushosha Dhanasya Vachu Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahatseva Prapunyatirtha Nishevana. O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. Shranvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Riddantastoya Bhadrani Vidunati Suritsatam. Shri Krishna, the person of the Godhead, who is Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor, truthful devotee, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotees, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtues when properly heard and chanted. Nasta prayashu baddeshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatutam asloke bhaktir bhavati nishtiki. By regular attendance in the classes of Bhagavatam and by reading of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service under the person of God, who is praised with thunderous songs, established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are continuing Srimad Bhagavatam based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna. Welcome again. So, Canto 1, Chapter 18, verses 32 to 40. Anything that you remembered from these sets of verses, please share that in the chat. We'll spend some time just reflecting on what we covered last week or the week before, and then we will proceed. Anything specifically that caught your attention, let us know. Madachana CD says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, when we get influence like a dog, like personality of Kali, we see our qualities in others. The faults that Shringi has, he projected that on March Parikshit, yes. And this is a hard pill to swallow. That if I see something, it's in me. It's very, very difficult to acknowledge. But if we analyze someone who is, let's say, a neophyte Kanishta devotee, because he is genuinely a Kanishta, thinking he's advanced, when he sees people, he thinks they're not advanced, I'm advanced. If you look at someone who's a pure devotee, who is genuinely advanced, who has genuine pure love of Krishna, but thinks he doesn't have Krishna, when he sees everyone as having Krishna, having pure love of Krishna. And besides him is he doesn't have. So just using this example of a neophyte and a pure devotee who genuinely have their different traits, but think differently, but their perception in the world is the reality that exists within. So similarly, we perceive the world according to the reality that is within. And that means if I can see certain things, it simply means that that exists within my frame of consciousness. Otherwise, I will not be able to pick it up. So as we become more and more purified, we are able to see less and less of what we think, but more and more of the reality of our heart, which is what gets perceived. I like to give that example of, I'll just mention it briefly. Prabhupada was arriving at one temple and the temple president asked who can make a tulsi skirt, because the next morning during Mangal Aarti there would be no tulsi skirt. So One couple said, we're happy to try to sew a nice Tulsi skirt for Srila Prabhupada, for Tulsi Devi. So they went home and they spent the whole night trying to sew a Tulsi skirt, which they never did in their life. Next, early in the morning, they came, they handed the skirt to the temple president. He looked at it and he said, "What is this? This is not a skirt." But anyway, there was no other skirt, so he put the skirt around Tulsi Devi. And they were they were heartbroken because they tried their best to render service and it really didn't turn out for this, to the satisfaction of the temple president. So it seems like there was a mistake, and they felt, they tried their best, and they were crying and feeling that they couldn't please the temple president. When Srila Prabhupada arrived and came into the temple room, he saw the Tulsi skirt, and the first thing he responded was, "Who made this beautiful Tulsi skirt? So wonderful." So here we can see what is perceived. Right? And yes, the temple president, in terms of managerial, from a managerial perspective, he may have been right in terms of it should be attractive, etc. But there's a higher perspective to it, and that is that Prabhupada, and that's what Prabhupada was able to perceive and detect. Prabhupada was able to perceive the sacrifice, the devotion, the motivation, the sincerity, the time they took. That's what Srila Prabhupada was able to see because of his depth of purity. And in our case, depending on the advancement, we'll be able to also see beyond just the externals, but I'll be able to see deeper into the activity. Shavina says, "Haribol, please accept my humble obeisances. I was contemplating on the Rudra principle and how it manifests in anger and steals the intelligence in different ways, like making one take sides and arguing to justify one's position. When one is under the influence of this principle, one may fail to see Krishna's hand in the situation." Yes. So the Rudra principle, and if we fall prey to it, let's say we're in an argument or we're getting angry, we can just say, "Sorry, Prabhu, I'm influenced by the Rudra principles. I'll see you later. Bye-bye." And then you leave. So the Rudra principle, very dangerous, very detrimental, overrides our intelligence. And in that state, you cannot make intelligent, decisive, proper decisions. It overrides. Again, a pure devotee, he is not influenced by this principle because he's above the three modes of material nature. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada would get angry, but Srila Prabhupada, he would get angry and his anger would be, powerful, practically shake. The devotees would shake when Prabhupada would become angry. And immediately the next instant, Prabhupada would be like nothing happened. Why? Because anger does not control Srila Prabhupada. But he controls the quality of anger in terms of where it needs to be deployed in a Krishna conscious way. So, yes, we need to be mindful of the Rudra principle. Amrita Radhika says, it's a gradual process to realize oneself. Bhakti Yoga is the most powerful of all. Patience, utsaya nishchara darya, tat tat karma parvartanat. One has to have utsaya, enthusiasm, confidence, and patience. These three qualities must be there. We must cultivate this. We must have it. We need to be enthusiastic in rendering service. We must be confident in the process, that the process will deliver. Confident in Krishna, confident in Krishna's holy name. And we need to be patient at the same time. Because the process is, and like we shared the video, depending on our surrender, the process can be instant, or it can take it can take a long time. So relative to our sincerity and dedication and commitment, to that degree, the effect will be there. So in most cases, it's a gradual process. But if one is serious, then it's an instant process. Thank you very much for everyone's feedback. Let us proceed. So just some power statements mentioned about the Rudra principle that I quoted. When the Rudra principle is exhibited by persons who are not engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the angry person falls down from the peak of his improved position. And then we quoted Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's from translation from one of his songs, where he says, if you want to get rid of the influence of the dog-like personality of Kali, then just sing the glories of the beautiful son of Sachi, Mother Sachi, Sachinandan. He is the savior of the Kali. He is the savior of Kali Yuga Pavan, and he is Kali Bhayanashana, the destroyer of all fear caused by the age of quarrel. So we need to take shelter of Shishini Tagore. We need to take shelter of them. They have come specifically in this age, they've come for us. And by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada has delivered them to us. So we have no excuse. We have no excuse to say, I'm bound. We have no excuse to say that I'm entangled and influenced by Kali. We have no excuse to say that I cannot be saved, I'm very fallen. And we have no excuse to say that I'm plagued with fear. If and only if we take shelter of Sachinanda, beloved and beautiful son of Mother Sachi. So we're going to conclude this last section. Last week, we heard how Shringi responded to the situation. And now we're going to see how Shamik Rishi responds to the situation. So we always have to understand that it's not like there's only one way to respond to every situation. See, you cannot prevent the negative or the bad situations to come into your life. Nobody's going to complain about the good. That everyone's happy about. But negative situations, you cannot stop negative situations to come into your life. They will. But what you can stop is negatively getting influenced by those situations. So not every situation will be good, but good can come from every situation. How? If you develop the perspective of Maharaj Parikshit, if you develop the perspective of Shamik Rishi. That's why the Bhagavatam is presenting these personalities. Why? Because these personalities, through their lives, are giving us examples of how to respond to situations. So we need to learn how best to respond. Let us start text 41. Nishamya saptam atad ad arham narendram sa brahmano natmajam abhyanandat ahoba tam ho mahat adyate kritam alpiyasi yasidroha ururdamo dhritam. The father heard from his son that the king had been cursed, although he should never have been condemned, for he was the best among all human beings. The rishi did not congratulate his son, but on the contrary, began to repent, saying, alas, what a greatly sinful act was performed by my son. he has awarded heavy punishment for an insignificant offense. So naturally, Shamik Rishi was definitely not pleased. And we see his perspective already. He's seeing that the king is the best of all among all human beings, and that his act was insignificant. And he was on the receiving side. He received the snake, and yet insignificant. Not a problem at all. So this, we can see how his son responded and how his father is responding to the exact same situation. And the son wasn't really on the receiving side. The father was on the receiving side. So we would have expected the father to be more reactive to the situation, but no. And the son has performed a great sinful act. So he's lamenting, my son that I raised in a Brahminical culture, he has performed this sinful act. Alas, alas. Or Prabhupada's purport. The king is the best of all human beings. He is the representative of God, and he's never to be condemned for any of his actions. In other words, the king can do no wrong. And why is that the case? Because the king is representing Krishna. If one is 100% representing Krishna, then he will always abide by Krishna's instructions and do what pleases Krishna. Therefore, there can be no wrong. In other words, the king can do no wrong. The king may order hanging of a culprit, son of a Brahman, but he does not become sinful for killing a Brahmana. Even if there is something wrong with the king, he is never to be condemned. A medical practitioner may kill a patient by mistaken treatment, but such a killer is never condemned to death. So what to speak of a good and pious king like Maharaj Parikshit? So Prabhupada gives a very beautiful example. Sometimes a medical doctor will be busy treating a patient, and all of a sudden he does something wrong and the patient is killed. But naturally, you possibly signed a letter or agreement saying, you cannot take any, you can't charge or you can't punish the doctor. But the point Prabhupada is making is that even if the doctor, while he's treating his patient, the patient dies, still you can't condemn the medical practitioner to death. So what to go about a king? And not just an ordinary king, saintly king, Raj Rishi, pure devotee of Krishna. In the Vedic way of life, the king is trained to become a Raj Rishi or a great saint, although he is ruling as a king. It is the king only by whose good government the citizens can live peacefully and without fear. Now note here, the statement Prabhupada is going to speak about this again. It says it is the king only by whose good government the citizens can live peacefully and without fear. If you look at what people want from a good government, is to be peaceful, to live without fear, and have the prosperity to live peacefully and without fear. It can only come from good governance. And good governance can only come when there is a saintly king in charge. Otherwise, we will not get the desired result. Therefore, you find in the Vedic system, there was no democracy. In the Vedic system, there were no different parties voting. No, in the Vedic system, there is the governance with a king in charge. And that king had to be a saintly king. The Raj Rishi would manage his kingdom so nicely and piously that his subject would respect him as if he were the Lord himself. That is the instruction of the Vedas. The king is called Narendra, or best among the human beings. How then could a king like Maharaj Parikshit be condemned by an inexperienced, puffed up son of a Brahmana, even though he had attained the powers of a qualified Brahmana? So, Maharaj Parikshit, again, Prabhupada is emphasizing, and the verses are emphasizing, was not at fault, even though he did something that apparently looked like not good and a fault. But from one perspective, as a king, there is no fault and cannot be condemned. Whereas the Brahmana, the son, if you're looking at that situation of the son cursing, Shringi cursing, then it seems like Shringi is correct. See, so it's interesting how if you just look at the two personalities and the situation, you may think, yeah, the king did wrong, and Shringi did the right thing by cursing Maharaj Parikshit because he shouldn't have done that. But here we see that what we may see or perceive on a deeper level may not be true. There may be a different situation, a different scenario. What may be right may be wrong, and what's wrong may be right. So we should never jump to conclusions. We always need to be able to see the situation through the eyes of someone who is genuinely pure. And I use the word genuinely pure because just someone who's in a managerial position or in an institution posted as a leader, a guru, temple president, a bhakta leader, bhakta commander, temple commander, any of these positions in an institution may not necessarily be advanced. They may have a position that they're able to serve in, but not necessarily completely spiritually advanced. So we need those who are genuinely advanced and able to then direct from that level the reality that we are able to perceive. Otherwise, if one is not genuinely advanced, then naturally one is going to perceive the situation through the tinges of the three modes of material nature and according to their own understanding, and then give you a conclusion that may also not be perfectly aligned to the truth. Robert continues. Since Shamik Rishi was an experienced good Brahmana, he did not approve of the actions of his condemned son. He began to lament for all that his son had done, and the king was beyond the jurisdiction of curses as a general rule. What to speak of a good king like Maharaj Parikshit? The offense of the king was most insignificant, and his being condemned to death was certainly a very great sin for Shringi. Therefore, Rishi Samika regretted the whole incident. So Shringi definitely used a machine gun to kill a mosquito. And if you use a machine gun to kill a mosquito, Prabhupada is going to tell us there will be a consequence. 42. Navai nibirnara devam parakyam samatum arhasya vipakva bude yatteja sadurvishahena gupta vindanti bhadranya kuto bayam praja. Oh my boy, your intelligence is immature, and therefore you have no knowledge that the king, who is the best among human beings, is as good as the personality of Godhead. He is never to be placed on an equal footing with common men. citizens of the state live in prosperity, being protected by his unsurpassable powers. So very, very strong chastisement he's giving his son. If Krishna decides to do something, and we see in Mahabharata, Krishna intervenes and does certain things in the Mahabharata that people may not appreciate. But whatever Krishna does is good, just like Krishna running away from the battlefield. And then he gets the name Venture. And for Kshatriya to run away from a battlefield, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself was telling Arjuna, hey, Arjuna, you can't run away from the battlefield. People will call you ill names and you'll be infamed. So you can't run away. No, you're going to fight. And here we see Krishna running away from the battlefield and getting a name. But Krishna, whatever he does is all good. In a conversation, Prabhupada would often make this point. Whatever Krishna does is all good. Why? Because Krishna is all good. There's no negativity in Krishna. Like in the Christian tradition, they have God, and they have God's equal, Satan, but who's negative. So God is positive, and then they have God's equal who's negative, but that doesn't exist. God does not have an equal, and it does not have a negative. The definition of God, the definition of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that he has no one equal or above him. And Krishna is completely pure, completely above the three modes of material nature. He has no tinge of contamination, material qualities, ill intention, or any tinge of desire to harm. Whatever Krishna does is all good. So the king, who's practically like as good as God, whatever he does, especially here we're talking about a saintly king, because he's always aligned to the will and wish of Krishna, then we have to accept. 43. Alakshamane naradeva namni ratangapavanav anyanga loka tadhi chaura prachuro vinangshatyam akrak shamano vivaruta but shanat. My dear boy, the Lord who carries the wheel of a chariot is represented by the monarchical regime. And when this regime is abolished, the whole world becomes filled with thieves who then at once vanquish the unprotected subjects like scattered lambs. Now we're hearing the consequence of Shringi's actions. Prabhupada says, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, the monarchical regime represents the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. So that's a very powerful statement. This is the government that the Vedic scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam, wants to recommend and suggest. This is the government that Krishna arranged for the whole Mahabharata war to take place, to establish this type of regime, monarchical regime, not democracy. The king is said to be the representative of the absolute personality of Godhead, because he is trained to acquire the qualities of God to protect the living beings. The battle of Kurukshetra was planned by the Lord to establish the real representative of the Lord, Mahayudhishthira, an ideal king thoroughly trained by culture and devotional service with the martial spirit makes a perfect king. Such a personal monarchy, which is far better than the so-called democracy of no training and responsibility. The thieves and rogues of modern democracy seek election by misrepresentation of votes. And the successful rogues and thieves are like wolves who devour the mass of population as if they were scattered lambs. One trained monarch is far better than hundreds of useless ministerial rogues. And it is hinted herein that the abolition of a monarchical regime like that of Maharaj Parikshit, the mass of people become open to many attacks of the age of Kali. They are never happy in a much advertised democracy. The result of such a kingless administration is described in the following verses. So, democracy, Prabhupada would say, is demon crazy. People selecting those who have no devotional training, devotional service training. They have no culture, and they are not Kshatriyas. So the Vedic system was very, very powerful and protective at the same time. Due to a monarchical regime where the king, we see, for example, everybody wants Ram Rajya. They want a king like Lord Ram, king like Yudhishthira, king like Maharaj Parikshit. Why? Because these Lord Ram is coming as a king, but he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Point is that a Raj Rishi, a saintly king, he is able to help his citizens spiritually. He is able to protect his citizens, being a powerful king. He is able to command respect, and people trust him. And he's able to direct people as per the desire of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's not there to exploit. He's not there to control. He's not there to fill his own back pocket. No, he's interested in the welfare of his citizens, understanding that they are all servants of Krishna, and my goal is to protect them, to take care of them, to guide them, to provide for them. And he has both the spiritual and material prowess and potency to do that. Otherwise, we see, and this is the reality that we are seeing, Prabhupada is purporting, and here it's, this was 5,000 years ago, Bhagavatam was given. And the philosophy of the Bhagavatam is eternal. Or Brahma received the Bhagavatam in 4 seed verses. So the Bhagavatam's philosophy is eternal, which means that the principles which are discussed in the Bhagavatam are also eternal. That means democracy will not solve, no matter which party comes in control. Democracy is not the solution. It's only a question of time that the people who are in the democratic party become demonized just by the nature of that model. They say everybody has a price. It's a question of time and question of value. But when you put a monarchical regime in place with a Mahabhagavata Raj Rishi who's in post, now that becomes a perfect scenario. And that has been throughout generations, over generations, in every universe, it's been there. Why? Because that is the perfect model of governance that the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself has created, designed, and enforced, even when he was here 5,000 years ago. 44. Tad adyana papam upaityanan vayam yanastana tasya vashor vilum kat parashparam gananti sapanti vrinjate pashum striyortan dasyavo jana. Due to the termination of the monarchical regime, the plundering of people's wealth by rogues and thieves, there will be great social disruptions. People will be killed and injured, and animals and women will be stolen. And for all these sins, we shall be responsible. So, the son has cursed the king to die. Such a king who will be killed will simply mean disastrous for the people, because now there is no Rajrishi, there is no king, there'll be thieves and rogues, and that simply means there will be exploitation, abuse, disaster. And Shamik Rishi is saying, I am responsible, we're responsible. So he's taking the blame as well. Robert's purport. The word na, we, is very significant in this verse. The sage rightly takes the responsibility of the Brahmanas as a community for killing monarchical government, and thus giving an opportunity to the so-called Democrats, who are generally plunderers of the wealth of the state subjects. The so-called Democrats capture the administrative machine without assuming responsibility for the prosperous condition of the citizens. Everyone captures the post for personal gratification, and thus, instead of one king, a number of irresponsible kings grow up to tax the citizens. It is foretold herein that in the absence of good monarchical government, everyone will be the cause of disturbance for others by plundering riches, animals, women, etc. The truth that we are all experiencing across the globe, practically in every country. And some people, may think, oh, how can Prabhupada, criticize like this? The truth is the truth, and we're experiencing. Find one democratic government that is truly, genuinely interested in the welfare of every citizen under their dominion. And when we talk about every citizen, we're not just talking about human beings. We're talking about even the animals, because even the animals are part of the city, state. They're also praja. So the king, he would protect Rajrishi would protect everyone in his kingdom. So even animals were not exploited and killed. So what to talk about human beings? 45. Tadarya dharma pravilityate nrinam varnashram macharya yutas trayimaya tatorata kama binive shitatmanam shuman kapi nam iva varna shankara. At that time, the people in general will fall systematically from the path of progressive civilization in respect to the qualitative engagement of the castes and the orders of society and the Vedic injunctions. Thus, they will be more attracted to economic development for sense gratification. And as a result, there will be unwanted population on the level of dogs and monkeys. Purport. It is foretold herein that in the absence of a monarchical regime, the general mass of people will be an unwanted population like dogs and monkeys. As the monkeys are too sexually inclined and the dogs are shameless in sexual intercourse, the general mass of population born of illegitimate connection will systematically go astray from the Vedic way of good manners and qualitative engagements in the castes and orders of life. And we see this slowly breathing in more and more, manifesting more and more. The culture, the Vedic culture of good manners is slowly dwindling. Previously, you would not do certain things that now people think is normal. So for example, 50, 100, 200 years ago, and again, we're talking about a culture family. Right? Some in a family that have been rooted in Vedic culture. And some of the values that are in Vedic culture naturally are also in other cultures. So here we're talking about a proper culture. So in previous time, you would see a cultural family. If you take, for example, husband and wife, mother and father, you would never find mother and father holding hands in public in a cultural family. They would hold hands behind the doors, in their rooms, but not publicly. In a cultural family, parents would never fight in front of the children. So these are some of, I'm just giving 2 examples. There may be many, many others. Whereas today, holding hands, people think, well, it's nothing wrong. And what about holding hands? They may even embrace, they may even do other things and still take photographs and put it on Facebook. Previously, you should, as a cultural person, you would cover yourself from head to toe, or at least from neck to toe. That was culture. Now, because of cost saving, people don't wear much, and then they'll still put on social media, and they think it's normal. And then people would even then comment, very nice. No, it's not very nice. It's uncultured. It's breathing the wrong culture. And even in the Vaishnav community, we see this going on. So this is Kali penetrating, taking advantage of the wrong government in place and breaking the culture slowly but surely. So Prabhupada is warning, this is the nature, and the Bhagavatam is saying, this is the nature. People will become like animals, like monkeys, and shameless. They wouldn't even think twice. They'll think it's normal. A dog, he would, have sexual intercourse even on the street with no problem at all. And if for a human being to do that, that is shameless. But we see, consider, for example, a rapist. He, just like in India, there was this whole situation of where they took this lady and like gang rapes. So that means they are shameless in that they can engage in inappropriate acts, even in front of others. So this is the degradation that the Bhagavatam is revealing, that is there. And someone who has culture, they'll think, how can this be? I mean, how can this, how can a person even think like that? See? So Kali is penetrating, Kali is breaking the fiber of culture. And Krishna consciousness is meant to revive, is meant to resuscitate not only the wisdom, the knowledge that the knowledge of Krishna consciousness, knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but even the culture, the way of living, the way of behaving with that knowledge, right? It's not just the knowledge that is there, but it's the knowledge with the way of life, which is the perfect form that we should present and represent. Robert continues, the Vedic way of life is the progressive march of the civilization of the Aryans. The Aryans are progressive in Vedic civilization. The Vedic civilization's destination is going back to Godhead, back home, where there is no birth, no death, no old age, and no disease. This is Vedic civilization. This is culture. This is proper culture. The culture that directs one to live in this world with Krishna in the center and helping one behave, act, and live to go back home, back to Godhead. Anything that is against this principle is not Vedic civilization. It's not Krishna consciousness. It is a manifestation of the agents of Kali and Kali to destroy the Vedic civilization. And if you destroy Vedic civilization, which is meant to help people achieve, as probably saying, go back home, then it means that by embracing that specific culture, we simply bind ourselves in this world. The Vedas direct everyone not to remain in the darkness of material world, but to go towards the light of the spiritual kingdom, far beyond material sky. The qualitative caste system and the orders of life are scientifically planned by the Lord and his representatives, the great rishis. This perfect way of life gives all sorts of instructions in matter of both material and spiritual. The Vedic way of life does not allow any man to be like the monkeys and dogs, following Memnon's philosophy of simply devoting oneself to economic development for sense gratification. Such a degraded civilization of sense gratification and economic development is the byproduct of a godless or kingless government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The people should not, therefore, blame the poor administrations they themselves elect. So we see this slogan, we are for the people, we are elected by the people. And everybody says, wonderful. And the Bhagavatam is saying, disastrous, disastrous. You should be for Krishna, it should be by Krishna. So that is the best. Otherwise, it is disastrous. Dharmapalo nara patir satu samrad brit priyak shrava sakshan mahabhagavato rajarshir haya medyat shutrit shramaya yuto dino nevash mach chapam arhati. The Emperor Parikshit is a pious king. He is highly celebrated and is a first-class devotee of the personality of Godhead. He is a saint amongst royalty, and he has performed many horse sacrifices. And such a king is tired and fatigued, being stricken with hunger and thirst. He does not at all deserve to be cursed. So Shamika Rishi is justifying his action, the king's actions. He did what he did was rightful. After explaining the general codes relating to the royal position and asserting that the king can do no wrong and therefore is never to be condemned, the sage Shamika wanted to say something about Emperor Parikshit specifically. The specific qualification of Maharaj Parikshit is summarized here in the king, even calculated as a king only, was most celebrated as a ruler who administered the religious principles of the royal order. He ruled so powerfully that there was no place for Kali to reside. That shows the expertise, glory of Maharaj Parikshit. In the Shastra, like in today's government, there's, oh, we have so much corruption, right, on every level. So that is the difference. In the Shastra, the duties of a caste and orders of society are prescribed. All the qualities of a Kshatriya mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 1843 were present in the person of the emperor. He was also a great devotee of the Lord and a self-realized soul. Cursing such a king when he was tired and fatigued with hunger and thirst was not at all proper. Shamika Rishi thus admitted from all sides that Maharaj Parikshit was cursed most unjustly. So, very, very bad event, unjust. And now we're going to hear from the next chapter how Maharaj Parikshit responds to this apparent unjust situation. We're also going to now hear how Shamika Rishi responds after explaining this unjust situation. Although all the Brahmanas were aloof from the incident, still, by the childish action of a Brahmana boy, the whole world situation was changed. Thus, Shamik Rishi, a Brahmana, took responsibility for all deterioration of the good orders of the world. So Shamik Rishi is now taking the blame on himself. The whole Brahmana race is going to be destroyed. People are going to be affected. Just because we have destroyed, we have killed a powerful king, a Raj Rishi, devotee, a saint, somebody who was powerful. So he's taking the blame now for this whole destruction on himself. Apapeshu swa prityeshu val lena pavak bodhina papam kritam tat bhagavan sarvatma shantum arhati. Then the Rishi prayed to the all-pervading personality of Godhead to pardon his immature boy who had no intelligence and who committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate and who deserved to be protected. So we can learn from Shamik Rishi in terms of accountability and responsibility. And then also, when we in a situation that we cannot repair, that we cannot do anything about, then we take shelter of the Supreme Personality of God. And here also, Shamik Rishi is again acknowledging that Maharaj Parikshit was sinless. So he was able to perceive that Maharaj Parikshit is sinless, which means that being sinless, whatever actions Maharaj Parikshit engages in is not due to his conditioned self because he is sinless. Being a pure devotee of the Lord, he is perfectly, completely in the hands of Krishna. And therefore, whatever he did was perfect. Everyone is responsible for his own action, either pious or sinful. Rishi Shamika could foresee that his son had committed a great sin by cursing Raj Parikshit, who deserved to be protected by the Brahmins, for he was a pious ruler and completely free from all sins because of his being a first-class devotee of the Lord. Now, what's interesting in this statement the Prabhupada is making, and obviously mentioned in the verse itself by Shamik Rishi, is we would think that the king is protecting the Brahmanas. But here we see that actually it's the Brahmanas who are protecting the king. And the saintly kings, they know that. It is the Brahmanical power. That is why the saintly kings, they would make sure that the Brahmanas are protected. Because it is the Brahmanical power that protects the saintly kings. They get direction from the Brahmanas. They get the protection from the Brahmanas. So the Brahmanas play a very, very important role in the kingdom of a Rajarishi, a saintly king. And here we see, because the Brahmanas, specifically the son of a Brahmana, committed a great sin, then that falls on the shoulders of the Brahmanas. And in this case, Shamik Rishi is taking that blame. When an offense is done unto the devotee of the Lord, it is very difficult to overcome the reaction. The Brahmanas, being at the head of the social orders, are meant to give protection to their subordinates and not to curse them. There are occasions when a Brahmana may furiously curse a subordinate Kshatriya or Vaishya, etc. But in the case of Raj Parikshit, there was no grounds. It's already explained. Foolish boy had done it out of sheer vanity in being a Brahmana's boy, a Brahmana's son. And thus he became liable to be punished by the law of God. The Lord never forgives a person who condemns his pure devotee. So Shringi is in big trouble. He committed a very, very grave sin, not just killing and cursing a devotee, but actually killing a pure devotee. That is totally, totally disastrous, dangerous. And especially from Krishna's perspective. The pure devotee, he does not consider, he doesn't, anything that, when somebody directly attacks a pure devotee, he doesn't take it seriously. But Krishna definitely does not appreciate. And Krishna will make sure that the reaction is administered. Therefore, by cursing the king, the foolish Shringi had committed not only a sin, but also the greatest offense. Therefore, the Rishi could foresee that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save his boy from his sinful act. He therefore directly prayed for pardon from the Supreme Lord, who alone can undo a thing which is impossible to change. The appeal was made in the name of a foolish boy who had deployed no intelligence at all. So his father is praying to Krishna, my Lord, forgive my son who has no intelligence, overcome by pride. Please forgive him. Only you are able to forgive. It's a very, very grave sin. So now Prabhupada raises two questions. First, a question may be raised herein that since it was the desire of the Lord that Parikshit Maharaj be put into an awkward position so that he might be delivered from material existence, then why was a Brahmana's son made responsible for this offensive act? Because it's a very dangerous act, disastrous act for Shringi. So why did the Lord put Shringi in this situation? Because it was the Lord's plan. Couldn't it be an adult? So Prabhupada answers it. The answer is that the offensive act was arranged to be performed by a mere child so that he could be excused very easily. And thus the prayer of the father was accepted. So yes, we see how Krishna is using different people. And Krishna perfectly used a young boy. Why? Because when the father prays, my Lord, forgive this. My son is so, he's not intelligent. Please forgive him. He's foolish. Please forgive. Yeah, okay, no problem. He's a son. He's a small boy. What does he know? Okay, I'll forgive him. So just forgive him. If it was an adult, no, he's an adult. He's experienced. He's educated. He cannot be forgiven. So this is why Shringi was used in this whole situation. But if the question is raised, now Prabhupada asks the second question. But if the question is raised, why the Brahmana community as a whole was made responsible for allowing Kali into world affairs, the answer is given in the Varaha Purana, that the demons who acted inimically towards the personality of Godhead, but were not killed by the Lord, were allowed to take birth in the families of Brahmanas to take advantage of the age of Kali. So now, why is the responsibility on the Brahmanas that they are now the cause of this whole destruction that's going to permeate in Kali Yuga? And the question or the answer is Krishna's mercy. When Krishna was here, there were demons who were inimical towards the Lord, but who were not killed by the Lord. So Krishna gave them an opportunity to take birth in a Brahmana family. So demons taking birth in Brahmana family, how are they going to act? Demonically. So why is Krishna giving them that opportunity? So that they can at least improve being born in a Brahmanical family and surrounded by Brahmanical culture. Krishna is giving them the opportunity to improve, rectify, and advance. This is Krishna's mercy. The all-merciful Lord gave them a chance to have their births in families of pious Brahmanas so that they could progress towards salvation. But the demons, instead of utilizing the good opportunity, misused the Brahmanical culture due to being puffed up by the vanity in becoming Brahmanas. The typical example is the son of Shamik Rishi. And all the foolish sons of the Brahmanas are warned hereby not to become as foolish as Shringi, and to be always on guard against the demonic qualities which they had in their previous births. Foolish boy was of course excused by the Lord, but those who do not have a father like Shamik Rishi will be put into great difficulty if they misuse their advantages obtained by birth in a Brahmana family. So Krishna is giving them the opportunity, and if they misuse it, they will take the consequence. They'll have to accept the consequence. As Prabhupada started off the previous purport to say, one is responsible for all actions. So Krishna is merciful. He can give you an opportunity, but if you misuse the opportunity, well, then you take the reaction. Similarly, in our case, Prabhupada has given us the opportunity to be Krishna conscious. Prabhupada may even give us opportunity to, lead his movement in different ways. And that's a grave responsibility. If we misuse the opportunity to become Krishna conscious, or we misuse the opportunity of managing his society, then it's a grave deviation, and we will be liable for the reaction. There is no excuse. No excuse. Doesn't mean that one is in a high leadership position that one can do anything because he is in a high leadership position. It's okay. No, it's not okay. That opportunity is given by the Lord and by Srila Prabhupada so that we can be of service, protect those under our care, and guide those under our care, and lead them on the right path to the full shelter of the Supreme Personality of God. Anything less than that, anything in the category of exploitation, deviation, well, the reaction is going to be there. 48. Tirakshkrita vipralabdha sapta sapta shipta hata api nasya tat pratikurvanti tat bhuta prabhavo hipi pihi. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. Very, very instructive. The devotees of the Lord are so forbearing that even though they are defamed, cheated, cursed, disturbed, neglected, or even killed, like in Maharaj Parikshit's case, they are never inclined to avenge themselves. This is the culture, the attitude that needs to be cultivated. Yes, others, the devotees, the Supreme Lord, they may do the needful. But one who's receiving, he is tolerant. Rishi Shamika knew that the Lord does not forgive a person who has committed an offense at the feet of a devotee. The Lord will only give direction to take shelter of a devotee. The Rishi thought within himself that if Maharaj Parikshit would counter curse the boy, the king might be saved. But the Rishi also knew that a pure devotee is careless about worldly advantages and reverses. Beautiful statement. But the Rishi also knew that a pure devotee is careless about worldly advantages and reverses. Why? Because it is totally, completely irrelevant. No matter how many advantageous positions you are in, you are still going to die. Birth, death, disease, and old age is going to be there. No matter how many reverses you go through, you're still going to get birth, death, disease, and old age. So for a pure devotee, this is irrelevant. Makes no difference. He's careless, he's negligent, he doesn't bother. But what he's interested in is pleasing Krishna. This he's very attentive to. What pleases Krishna? What pleases the pure devotees? This he's very, 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 very attentive to. As such, the devotees are never inclined to counteract personal defamation, curses, negligence, etc. As far as such things are concerned, in personal affairs, the devotees do not care for them. But in the case of they being performed against the Lord and his devotees, then the devotee take very strong actions. It was personal affair, and therefore Shamik Rishi knew that the king would not take counteraction. Thus, there was no alternative than to place an appeal to the Lord for the immature boy. So Shamik Rishi wanted the sage to counter curse. Yes, my son has cursed you, counter curse him. Let the curse come back, and let my son die in 7 days. So that way, at least we know that it's square now. His reaction is nullified. And the king had the power to do that. King Maharaj Parikshit could easily counter cursed it and cursed the son of Shamik Rishi, Shringi. But he didn't do that. And Shamik Rishi knew that he wouldn't do that, because why? He's a pure devotee. Pure devotee will not take these things personally. Oh, this is what Krishna wanted. Okay. Whatever you want, my Lord, I'll accept and carry on. So this is the nature and mentality. Therefore, Shamik Rishi knew that the only option was to appeal to the Supreme Personality of God. And as Prabhupada says, Krishna accepted. It is not that only the Brahmanas are powerful enough to curse or bless their subordinates. The devotee of the Lord, even though he may not be a Brahmana, is more powerful than a Brahmana. But a powerful devotee never misuses the power for personal benefit. Whatever power a devotee may have is always utilized in service towards the Lord and his devotees. Only. Whatever benediction, whatever powerful statements that Srila Prabhupada makes in his purports, in his conversations, they are more powerful than the statements of the Brahmanas. When a Brahmana cursed because of his position being completely truthful, Prabhupada said, if you take a cold shower for 12 years, whatever you say will be truthful. A Brahmana is born with Brahmanical qualities of truthfulness as one of them. So if they say something, if they utter a curse, then it becomes true. That's why we find throughout the whole history of the Bhagavatam, so many curses and counter curses, or this situation, like for example, in Krishna book, two trees, two Arjuna trees. Why did they become trees? Well, because of Narad Muni's curse. See, Narad Muni said, you become trees, so they became trees. So this is the power of the Brahmanas. But the pure devotees are even more powerful than the Brahmanas. So therefore, we have to also be careful of the pure devotees' curse. But we know the pure devotees won't curse, but their blessings are what we want to seek. So whenever we find, when we're reading, Srila Prabhupada would give so many blessings in his purports. And those blessings give us hope. So for example, even in Prabhupada's letters, Prabhupada would write, if you simply chant minimum nicely 16 rounds, follow the 4 regular principles, and try to preach to the best of your ability, you'll go back to Godhead in this lifetime. That's a blessing. It's a powerful blessing. And because Prabhupada is a pure devotee, is making that blessing, then that becomes our saving grace. So we should never underestimate the statements that Prabhupada is making in his Bhaktivedanta purports, or in his letters, or in his conversations. So every single word, every single statement of Srila Prabhupada is infused and backed by Krishna's potency, blessing, power. So it's not ordinary. Just like we're reading these words of Srila Prabhupada in his purports, they're not ordinary. They are backed by devotion, pure devotion. Like the example is given, if you have a gun with blank bullets and you shoot, it makes a noise, but there's no effect to the target because it's blank bullets. But the bullets with gunpowder, that will have effect. So all of Prabhupada's statements, they're not blank bullets. They are statements backed by pure devotion. But even though Prabhupada himself, in his in his song, when he landed in America, Prabhupada signs of insignificant beggar. Prabhupada writes in the song, I have no devotion, I have no knowledge. So that is Prabhupada's perspective. That's Prabhupada's heart. But we know that Prabhupada had knowledge. Prabhupada had devotion. So powerful, so amazing, so extraordinary that he was able to attract millions of people to the lotus feet of Krishna. So you can gauge, you can judge the situation by the fruit. So we can see from Prabhupada's preaching, we can understand his personality. So whatever the power of a devotee may have, he only utilizes that for Krishna and devotees, not for personal sense gratification, not for personal aggrandizement. 49. Iti putra kritang hena so nutapto mahamuni swayam viprakrito rajna nevagham tad achintayat. The sage thus regretted the sin committed by his own son. He did not take the king's insult against himself very seriously. Purport. The whole incident is now cleared up. Maharaj Parikshit garlanding the sage with a date snake was not at all a very serious offense, but Shringi cursing the king was a serious offense. Serious offense was committed by a foolish child only. Therefore, he deserved to be pardoned by the Supreme Lord, although it was not possible to get free from the sinful reaction. Maharaj Parikshit also did not mind the curse offered to him by a foolish Brahmana. On the contrary, he took full advantage of the awkward situation, and by the great will of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit achieved the highest perfection of life through the grace of Srila Sukadeva Goswami. Actually, it was the desire of the Lord, and Maharaj Parikshit, Rishi Shamika, and his son Shringi were all instrumental in fulfilling the desire of the Lord. So none of them were put into difficulty because everything was done in relation with the Supreme Person. So wonderful. Krishna is all good. So whatever Krishna is arranging, we should know the outcome is all good. While we're going through the situation before the end result, oh, it's good, bad, no, not good, a little frustrating, but the end result is supremely good. Here we see a perfect conclusion. Everyone was perfectly blessed. The son was forgiven. Shringi was forgiven. The sage didn't take it seriously, but he prayed to Krishna, and Krishna fulfilled his desire. The king who received the curse, he took that situation, awkward situation, and he took full advantage of it. That's the power. That's the lesson that we're going to learn. That even though you may be in the worst situation that others may perceive to be disastrous and unwanted, you can turn that into the most glorious situation. That's what Maharaj Parikshit did. To be cursed to die in 7 days. That's like the ultimate of all curses. And Maharaj Parikshit took that death sentence and took full advantage of that awkward situation and was able to achieve the highest perfection of life. So if Maharaj Parikshit can take the worst situation of death sentence, and convert that to the greatest life sentence of being eternally engaged in the service of the Lord in the spiritual world where there's no birth, death, in old age. And that is the perfect lesson for us, that in this world, no matter what happens, if we follow in the footsteps of Maharaj Parikshit, then no situation will ever be awkward. And even if that situation is awkward and we follow Maharaj Parikshit, it will become a blessing. And that's how we're going to transition to the last chapter in this canto, where now we're going to hear how Maharaj Parikshit is going to respond and how he's going to change this most awkward situation into the highest blessing and benediction by Sukadeva Goswami. 50. Prayasa sadavo loke parair dvandveshu jo jitam na vyantanti na reshyanti yata atma gunashraya. Generally, the transcendentalists, even though engaged by others in the dualities of material world, are not distressed, nor do they take pleasure in worldly things, for they are transcendentally engaged. The transcendentalists are the empiric philosophers, the mystics, and the devotees of the Lord. The empiric philosophers aim at the perfection of merging into the being of the absolute. Mystics aim at perceiving all-pervading supersoul, and the devotees of the Lord are engaged in the transcendental loving service of the personality of God. Since Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are different phases of the same transcendence, all these transcendentalists are beyond the three modes of material nature. Material distress and happiness are products of the three modes, and therefore the causes of such material distress and happiness have nothing to do with transcendentals. The king was a devotee, and the rishi was a mystic. Therefore, both of them were unattached to the accidental incident created by the Supreme Lord. Playful child was an instrument in fulfilling the Lord's will. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta Purports, first canto, 18th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled March Parikshit Cursed by a Brahman Boy. So as we practice Krishna consciousness, we will come to Brahma Bhuta Prasanna. We will come to a level where the material happiness and distress does not impact us. We simply continue engaging devotional service like a lotus growing in muddy water is not affected by the muddy water. It's aloof. Similarly, pure devotees of the Lord, those who are engaged in Krishna consciousness, they transcend material happiness and distress. Their only focus is engaging in loving service of the Lord and nothing else. And whatever the Lord wants to arrange, they accept it as the will of Krishna and continue. Their focus is Krishna, not the relative events that transpire within this world. Whereas those who are non-devotees, they get completely engrossed and affected by the relative material happiness and distress. And Krishna is not even in the picture. They don't think of Krishna. Therefore, Lord Krishna told Arjuna that you need to rise above Trey Gunya Vishaya Veda, Nishtre Gunya Bhavarjuna. That you need to rise above the three modes of nature. Become Matra Spashas Tukonte, Shitoshna Sukadukada. Become free from happiness and distress. Because they are there just due to objects come in contact with senses, the sense objects come in contact with the senses. You're going to experience happiness and stress. We need to rise above these things. So our focus should be on the Supreme Lord and service to the Supreme Lord. And the more we absorb ourselves in devotional service, the more we transcend the lower experiences that is there. And the perfect example is Maharaj Parikshit, who was a pure devotee of the Lord, and Shamika Rishi, who's a mystic. But they both have transcended the influence of the modes of material. Vantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nikai, O Pramanande, Hari Hari Bo. So next week, we're going to have a break now. Next week, there will be, okay, so if there's any questions or comments, please type that in the chat. Next week is Rath Yatra, so there is no lecture. And then we will be going off to Durban to do a 6-day seminar on Bhagavad Gita, because it's Gita week. So from after Balaram's appearance day, just before Janmashtami, we'll be in Durban. So at least for the next, until we come back after Prabhupada's, the week after Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja, the 8th of September. The week later, we'll continue with chapter 19. So we have a long break. Absorb yourself in pastimes of Krishna, pastimes of Balaram, pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. And this way, keep yourself shielded until we come back and continue with the Bhagavatam, last chapter of this canto. Right. Amma Radhika says, thank you, Nrsimha Prabhu, for explaining Srimad Bhagavatam so beautifully to all of us. We are grateful. Such valuable lessons for us to learn and apply in our lives. Yes. All credits go to Prabhupada's purports. I'm simply a postman just trying to share, and the postman gets no credits. But yes, thank you for the feedback. Shamananda Prabhu says, Hare Krishna, please accept our humble obeisance. All glory Srila Prabhupada, all glory Srimad Parikshit. Thanks very much for another wonderful class, sharing Srimad Bhagavatam for all of us. Thank you again, Shamananda Prabhu. All right. So let's see, Mother Lesh, Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the glorious Krishna Katha on the edge of my seat, waiting for the next class. Yes, now, so we just heard a prelude. The Bhagavatam hasn't started. The Bhagavatam hasn't started. We're just warming up, just the prelude. This is like setting the scene. The Bhagavatam hasn't really started in one sense. Bhagavatam is going to start when March Parikshit meets Sukadeva Goswami, next canto. So really Bhagavatam starts at the end of the first canto. Canto 2, Bhagavatam starts. But thus far we've covered so many wonderful lessons in Prabhupada's purport in the Bhagavatam. It's an ocean of nectar to guide us, to steer us, to elevate us, to bring us to the highest perfection, pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So such a wonderful, glorious scripture that we have been blessed, benedicted with. So let us not waste this opportunity of the gift of knowledge that we have received. What Prabhupada has given us, this knowledge is so powerful. It can give us the full perfection that the soul is striving for, soul is hankering for. It can eradicate every problem that exists. It can elevate us to the highest perfection that is possibly achievable. It can give us access to the highest bliss that is ever achievable. So we have this right in our hands. Let us not waste it. Let it not slip by. Let's take full advantage, encouraging each other to continue. And in this way, this will please Srila Prabhupada and the Supreme Personality of God. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Itai, O Pramanande, Hari Haribo.